Good morning, guys. I'm just resending the email with the link for the Teams meeting. I think the link is broken, so just give me one sec for that. Just give people a few minutes to join here. think we'll just give it a couple more minutes, let a few more people join, and then we can get started.
We need walk-on music.
I know, I was thinking
That's
about
what.
that. We need waiting room music.
Yep.
Give it one more minute and people can join as we're going. All right, I think we'll get started here. People might keep joining, but that's all right. Everyone can see my screen, yes? So,
Yep.
thank you all for joining us today. This is our presentation, our webinar on how you can maximize ROI with Microsoft Fabric. My name is Jordan, but this presentation will be presented by Neha Sharma, who is a data and AI solution specialist at Microsoft, and Patrick Chorley, who is a director and principal architect here at SDK.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so I'm going to do the first part of the presentation, and this is an introduction to Microsoft Fabric. I've created some videos that are like really quick walkthroughs of specific features. Just know that there's a lot of things that we can do in Fabric, a lot of really cool things we do in Fabric, and we're just kind of scratching the surface of them today. So we're going to do an overview of Microsoft Fabric, really short demos of a couple cool things that we can do, key features and capabilities, including the Copilot video, and how it integrates with other existing Microsoft solutions. And then Neha is going to focus on the business applications and use cases and basically some of the wins that Microsoft has had with Fabric. Cool. Next slide, please. If there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand. We might be cooking a little bit today as far as time goes, but I'll try to answer them all. Great. So let's do the introduction to Microsoft Fabric. So we start off with a slide here of a current state architecture that, as you can see, there's a lot of lines everywhere. And there's every analytics project has so many subsystems, and there's so much integration, and there's so many dependencies that we're building into our applications before we get data. These dependencies create data latency, which means the longer that it takes to actually produce the data to actually us consume it. That's data latency. If we can reduce that time, we're reducing our latency and therefore increasing the value that we can get out of that data. So if you go on the next slide there, this is a quote that I've heard a few times is, I'm the chief data officer. I don't want to be the chief integration officer, right? There's so many capabilities that we can get out of our data, and the integration part, spending all the time on the integration isn't that high value. Next slide, please. So introducing Microsoft Fabric. It's the data analytics in the era of AI. Next slide, please. So those not familiar with Microsoft Fabric, it has a lot of things that you may be familiar with. So Power BI, for example, Synapse, for example. So the data warehousing for data engineering of Synapse, Data Factory from Azure Data Factory, Power BI from, maybe you've heard of Power BI. One of the newer ones, Data Activator, uses a lot of what's in Logic Apps. So it's not really, we're not really reinventing the wheel. It's also based on the foundation of OneLake, which is just Azure Data Lake Gen 2, something we've been using for years at this point, but it is specific once you spin up Fabric, you have one copy of the OneLake, which makes it really easy for folks to create data products and share them because they're all using the same storage, and it's all built in a unified governance. So it's really easy to find and share data products, which is one of the really cool things about Fabric. It's also got Copilot built into it. So not only are all the engines rewritten to write to the OneLake quickly, Copilot is built into each one. So you don't really have to be an expert in any of these. You can upskill yourself to start working with them with Copilot. And you can also pick the one that is most of interest to you. So because we're sharing everything into a common format in OneLake in Delta Parquet, I can use Power BI to connect to it if I want, if that's what I'm familiar with. Or I can use Spark if I want to write Python, or I can write SQL. There's many different ways, and they're all executing on the same file, which reduces our data latency. So we're not importing and exporting into different formats. We're using a consistent format to reduce that latency, drive more value. Next slide, please. So we got a video. Did you share audio, Jordan?
It should work.
Let's give it
Let
a
me know if you
shot.
can hear it.
Awesome. Next slide. Cool. So I've heard these referred to as the four promises of Microsoft Fabric, the four foundations of Microsoft Fabric. It lets people know the reason things are designed the way they are in Fabric and the way that they're going to be continued to design. It's kind of the North Star as well as the foundation. So it wants to be a complete analytics platform. So instead of having Power BI separately and having your Synapse separately and your Azure Data Factory separately, we want to bring everything together and make it as a SaaS offering. This is really great. It super simplifies your costing. Now we're going to get to it in a further side. It's just the compute that you're using and the storage that you're using. Your storage is barely going to cost you anything. It's very cheap. The compute is the thing that you can configure, and you can do different workloads under different computes. You can really specify that to a pretty fine grain. It's also secured and governed because everything is stored consistently. There's a security and governance that we can build out for it, as well as like things like lineage that is automatically generated in Microsoft Fabric. It's also lake-centric and it's open. We talked a little bit about OneLake. People say it's like the OneDrive for data. So getting data products through it is very similar user experience to OneDrive. You can even interact with it through Teams. So if somebody's created a data set or a Power BI report, I can find it in Teams and interact with it. So if somebody's got KPIs they want to show me, or say they've got a notebook in Fabric where they're visualizing different data anomalies, they can show that off with me. Another thing is one copy. So we're able to work on the same data set with multiple different engines. So I said before, if I'm using Power BI and I want to connect to the data set, I can do that. If I want to write SQL against it, if I want to write Spark against it, if I want to type Python, it's all one copy. So we're reducing the data latency and allowing you more flexible options to interact with it. It's open at every tier. This one's, what does that really specifically mean? There's a lot of different ways that we can interact with our data, a lot of different accessibility options. So not only can I get to it with multiple different technologies, there's also many different ways that we can secure things. So from the workspace down to the like column and row level that we can apply, and those are consistent across the different technologies that we'd be using to connect to it. A big thing about Microsoft Fabric, and one of the reasons that SDK specifically invested in it, is empowers every business user. So we've been really pleased with how user-focused data creation and data product creation is for everyday business users. It's very intuitive. If you're familiar with Power BI, if you're familiar with Microsoft Office, you can start building things. Also, you can use Copilot to help you upskill yourself. So say, for example, you're not an expert at writing SQL, you can use Copilot to help you get what you're looking for. There's also alternatives like a visual query. So those familiar with SAS, creating SAS models, you've got your drag and drop that you can create to build your queries to. So you don't even have to write any code. There's many different things we can do in Fabric where I don't actually have to write any code to start creating data products. It's built into Microsoft 365. So again, there's a really commonality in a lot of the security stuff that we can do. So I can say things are confidential, for example, or contain PII, and they'll appear the same as they would for Microsoft 365. Driving that into site to action, again, the less data duplication that we can deal with, the faster we can drive in insight from our data. AI powered is kind of, because of the foundation it's built on, AI is built into every part of Microsoft Fabric. So whether that's Copilot accelerated, well, so that I can help develop data products faster by using Copilot to help me build. We'll see that in another slide. Writing natural language questions to our data, that's an option too. There's also AI-driven insights, and they're way easier to get to than normally they were before. Because they've integrated all the tools together, we can have our AI built in with our Power BI and our data engineering. Next slide, please. So here is a demo of me. I'm just loading some data. So what's really cool about Fabric is the ability to really manually manipulate data and create data products. So, if I was dealing with ERP data, I wouldn't use this method. But if I had a file on my computer that I wanted to add to some, I don't know, enterprise data in order to build a data product, I didn't want to build a pipeline for that. This is a fine example. If the data isn't going to change very much, this makes tons of sense. So I've uploaded a CSV. I'm going to make it a table in my OneLake, and that's going to make it just queryable like a SQL table would be, and I can ingest it, and I can transform it with a lot of the different tools. So right now, I'm just doing the drag and drop manual upload. I've uploaded the file, created a table for it. Now I can just look at the data. So this is letterbox data from the application Letterbox, showing I've got actors, I've got crew members, movies, and just poster information. If I want to look at this, I can use a notebook. Those not familiar with notebooks, it's just like a Jupyter notebook, it's just like a Databricks notebook, it's just like a Synapse notebook. In this case, I'm writing in Python, but as you see, I didn't type any Python. I just dragged it over from the navigator there, and I can even change the language that I want. So I was originally in Python, I dragged over my crew, now I'm dragging over actor, and it's written in SQL because I changed what I want the specific cell to be written in. What's cool about notebooks is you can jump between different languages if you want. If you're not like, if you know how to do something in Python, you don't know how to do it in SQL, you can do it in one cell and then go back to SQL. That's what's kind of cool about notebooks. I push execute, it's automatically going to use my cluster. It's using my standard cluster. You can also configure different clusters if you want to have embed libraries in them. I use one called Prophecy a lot. Instead of doing an install on the cluster every single time, I just install it by default and use that cluster. That's kind of a little bit out of the ordinary, though. Perhaps I think a lot of people can just use the inbound libraries. There's not a lot of demand for them. What's cool too is, again, I haven't written any code. I got some results, and now I've just gone to the visualizations tab, and I can see actors that have appeared in the most movies. So based on my data set, I can find specific actors that have appeared in the most movies, the count of the most movies, and then I can distribute this. I can create a copy of it. I can save it. I can push it into Power BI. There's a lot of different visualizations. And again, I haven't written any code at this point. I've just uploaded some data and started to visualize it, started to play around with it. I think it might be the end of this one. So the next one, I'm going to use the same data. Oh, yeah, great. So the next one, I'm going to use Copilot. So I've uploaded my data, played around with it a little bit, but I want to load movies into a data frame and filter out movies by date not from 2024. So I want to filter anything not from the year 2024. I don't know how to write Python, for example. Say that I don't. It's going to write all the code for me. I'm going to copy it into code. You can also do it in line. I find this one returns a little bit better results. So you can see here, it knows enough to know what table to use. It knows what column I would filter. It does a substring on it to filter out only things in 2024 and shows off the results. So then I could continue the visualization with them. I could do continual transformations if I needed to do it. I could say, oh, that's not quite right. I want this, this, and this. But yeah, just showing off some examples of things that I can do with data where I don't actually have to know how to use Python that well. It's just drag and drop in most cases or using Copilot, which is enabled on F64 capacity. So if you go a little bit lower than that, you're not going to be able to use Copilot, but at a certain threshold, all the workloads will use Copilot. Next slide, please. So here's another video. I'll kind of let it speak for itself. I'll explain what it is for a second. Oh, is there no audio on this one? I'll just
No,
talk it
doesn't
out.
seem like it. Yeah.
So in this case, we're going to use Copilot to write a report. So you can see here, we picked a data set and we're saying create a report that summarizes sales information of the company. I want to include the following information. We're listing a whole bunch of different KPIs. Do 5 overall, maybe? No, only 4. Okay, so it's working on it. And because we have explained it well enough, the names of we've named things correctly enough and we've trained it enough, it can generate these visualizations before it. We're also asking to create an additional page, and now we've got city level finances here. So again, just using Copilot to help us build out reports. I might not be an excellent Power BI developer, but if I have the data ingested into Fabric, I can really quickly build out those visualizations by myself. I don't need development time. That's pretty cool, and it's a really great way to show off that non-technical people really have the ability to create data products of value in Microsoft Fabric, and they don't need a lot of technical know-how in order to do that. Next slide. I'm going to hit this one really quick because we are running a little bit low on time, but hey, let me know if anyone has any questions. We can stay a little bit longer if we need to. OneLake allows you to store a lot of different data products, but if that were the case by itself and you didn't have additional governance practices that you can perform in it, you may end up with just a lot of people stuff in the lake that they weren't using. So what we have is OneLake for all domains. We have a data domain admin, and what they can do is group different workspaces which contain different data products together. So I can say different data products and different data workspaces are certified or promoted. So everybody has the ability to create things if they have the permission to, I guess I should specify. If they have the permission, they can create data products and share them. But if we haven't done our due diligence, if we haven't performed the governance to make sure that the numbers that they're seeing on the screen are actually correct, we may not want to certify them. We want to say, yeah, it's a great, useful data product, but necessarily it's not certified, and therefore it's useful, but if it breaks or something, we can't support it, versus a certified data product where if something happened to it, we'd be able to fix it immediately because it follows best practices. So that's a huge capability, right? It's moving one more step from everybody's allowed to create data products to everybody's allowed to create data products, and we want to promote the ones that are the most useful to people and the most ones that we can get behind from a governance perspective, and therefore driving their discoverability. Ones that are certified or promoted are easy to find from a discovery perspective because they're promoted to you. Next slide, please. So it's just saying here that I'm the sales data admin. I'm grouping the different workspaces together. We talked about this a little bit before. Basically, the two different things that I'm paying for in Fabric. One is compute, one is storage. Storage for the most part is pretty cheap. It's dollars per gigabyte per month. So, those familiar with paying for cloud storage, that won't be uncommon. Those not familiar with Fabric or maybe familiar with Power BI is you pay for a SKU of compute, but that's going to open up just about everything in Fabric for you. You can go pay as you go, or you can do a 1-year reservation to save some money. And like I said, that kind of opens the door to all you can do in Fabric. So once you have a compute, you can start doing data engineering, you can start doing your Power BI. It all would use the same compute, but you can also specify numbers of the compute, which is probably a better practice to make sure that one compute is used for querying Power BI, maybe one compute's used for your data transformation. That way there's no bottlenecks. But again, the compute is the thing that actually runs it. The storage is separate. You have the true separation between compute and storage. There's the pricing. Also available online. So capacity units, your SKU number, your pay as you go, and your reservation. So this is for compute. Next slide, please. All right, Neha. Sorry. Getting through a lot. Hope if there's any questions, people hit me up in the chat there.
Awesome. All good. Thanks, Patrick. So today, team, I'm hoping to kind of share with you and highlight some stories of customers either I've worked on or team members close to me, just of customers that have transformed their entire operations with Fabric and significantly reduced costs as well with consolidating their data and analytics stack end to end with the Fabric platform. So to put things into perspective moving forward, I'd like for you to just put yourself in the data team's shoes for a moment and just to understand what the challenges are they're facing. I think Patrick also articulated this and showed you guys that architecture diagram, right? But the challenges that teams today are facing are really looking at their entire data stack and looking at the fact that it's growing year over year, and yet it remains fragmented, right? Because you're going to have to piecewise a lot of different subsystems together to actually achieve that end-to-end data platform that can do everything in the data journey from integration to storage to enriching that data and then, downstreaming to analytics. And this results in a couple different things, right? So high sort of licensing costs as a result from maintaining these different platforms, operational inefficiencies that are caused by these silos, right? And different teams, you might even have different skill sets within the organization. So data engineers are using Python as an example versus you've got Transact SQL developers, maybe you've got Oracle developers, right? So it really depends on how you've kind of built that out over the years. But the complexity continues to be there, right? When it comes to integration and the movement of the data there's high complexity. So when you're trying to achieve scalability and next slide, please, Jordan. I wanted to give you guys examples of customers. So one customer, before we even dive into Zeiss, as an example that I've personally worked with, has reported spending over 40% of their data budget on just integration tools and duplicative sort of storage alone. And these inefficiencies often lead to stagnated innovation, especially as you're thinking about, hey, how are we going to have a data platform that's going to support our AI innovation? That's going to get very, very difficult, right? So Microsoft Fabric helps to address some of these challenges. That's why we're naming it an end-to-end unified data platform. Again, it has a lot to do with the feedback that we got from our CDOs and our C-level executives. And really, we're helping to consolidate those data pipelines, the storage layer, and make sure that you have analytics in one ecosystem, right? So this is a SaaS offering. And with Zeiss Group here, they're a pioneer in optical solutions, right? And so they actually adopted Microsoft Fabric on Azure as well. And they had sort of several key business benefits, right? They were able to integrate all of their different data sources seamlessly into a single pane of glass, single source of truth for the organization. And that integration has improved efficiency, by streamlining that data analytics workflow, right, over time. It's reducing the need for a additional infrastructure, saving time, saving resources, right? And so faster data processing and analysis can then enable your AI-driven innovation. And that's exactly what is done for this customer here. Next slide, please, Jordan. The next one here is Provincial Health Services Authority, right? So a lot of you guys are likely familiar with them. They also did something similar where they were able to consolidate their data stack. One thing in particular that they were dealing with quite a bit, if you know about healthcare data specifically, a lot of it is unstandardized, right? So they get a lot of different requests from different teams. I work in healthcare. I cover public sector customers. So I'm way too close to this issue, but essentially what they're dealing with is really, really slow analysis, right? They've got a backlog, not just them, but many hospitals, over 200, 300 reports that have been requested to actually, lead to insights from the data teams. But again, there's a huge backlog because it requires a very specific skill set. And a lot of the hospitals as well who have EMR systems, especially the big ones, right? Cerner, Epic, Meditech, those guys actually need highly, highly specialized, skilled individuals to be able to create those reports. So that creates, again, its own set of complexities. Not that that role necessarily is not important, but to be able to scale in that environment is very difficult. So finding a way to kind of supplement that analytics, and especially for hospitals and healthcare, very, very important. So with them, PHSA is actually committed to Microsoft Azure. They created a platform actually for analytics and data, and they call it Panda. And so they're moving to standardized data access, right? Making sure that they're enabling faster, more comprehensive insights. And again, it's instead of taking months, it's actually reduced down to days to be able to create some of those reports and requests that they get from the different teams across their organization. And then last slide there, Jordan, on the case studies. So this final example that I want to share with you is for City of Oslo. I love this because they were able to provide us with a quote there, but essentially they're using Power BI, right? They're using SharePoint, they're using Dataverse, a lot of our different solutions across the different stacks, right? Dynamics, they've got Modern Workplace, all sorts of systems when it comes to Microsoft. And they didn't have a unified view of how all of these systems connect, right? And that's often the feedback we get, but the number one problem that Microsoft has solved in this scenario and many others with Fabric is we've kind of connected the dots. So think of Power BI sitting in between sort of your Office stack, if you can imagine it on this side, and then sort of the Fabric stack here, right? So you've got the entire data journey. It ends with sort of publishing things in Power BI. And then beyond that, we've also integrated into, hey, let's publish reports via Teams. Let's, create a little trigger that if the data changes through Data Activator, which is one of Fabric's features, let's make sure there's a trigger there that if the data changes, we're notifying individuals that need to be notified, whether it's in Outlook, whether it's in Teams, whether it's, again, anywhere in that Office stack that they're actually working in, right? So that's the kind of integration that we really pride ourselves in. And the example here is essentially a director would have to log in to 25 different tools and portals to be able to see data for their entire district. And now we were able to sort of consolidate. They adopted Power BI, they adopted Fabric, and they're able to see everything under a single unified view, right? With all of their systems and how they can essentially use that to better service their constituents and people across their different teams, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. And in addition to just show you how Copilot, I know Patrick kind of shared some of the demos there, how Copilot can kind of help to enhance some of this as well, because they've adopted F64 and they've got Copilot in their environment. We did a survey. We interviewed about 200 people. We watched them use Copilot versus like standalone Power BI and Fabric, right? And it was really amazing to see and receive feedback that Copilot users were actually 52% faster at completing their data analysis tasks, and their insights themselves were 36% more accurate. So not only faster, but more accurate, right? And 90% of those people said they'd use it again. I imagine personally, because I use Copilot in my day-to-day, it's a feeling of relief to be able to do something and to be good at it, right? So I don't think you'd want to go back from that necessarily. And so that's really what we're trying to help enable with Fabric and the platform, especially with the integration of Copilot in all of those experiences. And then Jordan, next slide. And then I'll just finish off with this. This is essentially a Forrester's study that we did with Microsoft Fabric. And this is for one of our mid-sized customers, or a number of them. We kind of averaged it out, but the results were pretty impressive, right? So if you're looking at the stats on the screen here, we're talking about 379% ROI over 3 years with Fabric, right? That's not just a random number. It came from these three big wins that we've been talking about this entire session. Multiple tools, right, that are in your environment, being able to consolidate that's a big win. The second is really boosting your data engineering productivity, and that's oftentimes what takes up 90% of time at every single company, right? It's 99%, dare I say, right, is data engineering. It's getting to high quality data that's clean, that's prepped and ready to go for analysis. That's what takes most of the time for companies. So being able to cut that down by even 25, 30%, and that's where these numbers are coming from, is what's boosted productivity. It's boosted these results. And then, of course, cutting costs because of security, governance, compliance as well, because of its built-in governance features, right? And the integration, again, with Purview, which is our governance solution, right? I would say not only with Fabric, with anything really outside and the entire Microsoft ecosystem, if you're looking at how to maximize and get the most out of the solution, it's really about integration. Like that's the thing that we've solved. So the power of any Microsoft solution comes from that integration that we've been able to achieve. Now, if we break down the numbers here, right, customers are really saving 30 to 50% on their TCO by bringing in all their data tools together, and that's what's resulted in this win. Storage costs are actually dropped by 30% because OneLake's, storage actually includes deduplication. So not only are you bringing in data, and even if it's in the Azure platform, right, you're not actually bringing in data and paying for that duplicated data either. It's either mirrored or shortcut, or we've got something there so that you're not double paying for storage. Same with AWS S3 buckets. If you've got a footprint there, we're not actually telling you to pay for it in Fabric either, right? So again, that ease of making sure you're not double paying for storage, and also that you've got that single view of everything that you do have. And lastly, they're seeing, again, that productivity boost between 15 to 20%, depending on what it is they're using. But those workflows are smoother, right? There's less maintenance. And they're able to just get to, hey, Copilot, I want to write a code to build a machine learning model that predicts XYZ, right? And you can do that within notebooks like Patrick was showing. That's the kind of stuff that I think really, really helps with that data journey, or that data individual that's going in there and going, okay, it would take me a lot of manual effort and maybe months to dig through what all of these, thousands of tables are and how to build an ML model that will predict this. But Copilot is sort of that assistant that can help you through it, right? And these savings aren't just sort of sitting around, right? Customers are putting the money right back into innovation, driving growth, and really, really helping sort of reduce, time and resources that are wasted on the legacy systems that have existed for the past few years. So it's not just a nice to have. I think it's a solution that plays really, really well with either your current stack, whether it be multi-cloud, on-prem, or even Azure, right? We're very, very focused on making sure that we solve all of those integration problems for you, and we're building a platform that can last. Awesome. Back to you, Patrick.
Yeah, perfect. So from an SDK perspective, these are all available through the Azure Marketplace. What's the next steps for you folks? So a lot of people say like, I understand all the marketing of Fabric, but like, is it actually going to work for me? Or I have a question about one specific part of it. That's what our free briefing is. So we set up a meeting with you. You tell us what you want to see necessarily, or maybe the complex use cases, and we just talk it out. So it's 4 hours. We'll go away. We'll come up with some presentation material, and we'll come back and present it to you and see if you have any questions. That's a really good way to get a better understanding of Microsoft Fabric, to see if it fits with you. Next is a POC or pilot, so we can do a really small, really digestible way to see if Fabric is a good fit, or like a full-blown implementation. So like we've made it kind of what we call t-shirt sizes, just as a just to show as a way to go forward with Microsoft Fabric. So feel free to reach out. Feel free if there's any questions, raise them now, or please in the chat. And I think that's our final slide. Is that our last one? Yeah, thank you. So if there's any further questions or, yeah, please follow up if anybody has any concerns. Where's SDK based out of? So I'm in Edmonton. Largely, a lot of it is in Calgary. We've got a Vancouver office. We're going to get a Toronto office. We've got about 15 people there virtually in Toronto. We've also got about 5 or 10 people virtually in Montreal. So kind of all across Canada. We also have an offshore office in Chennai, India. So we have 24/7 support. As well as we do development with them too. So kind of, we're all over, but mainly across Canada.
Nice to meet you as well, Nishan. This is actually one of my customers, so
Oh, nice.
yeah. And Patrick, I think that concern is actually coming from the tariffs conversation that's happening. So are
Oh,
you
sure.
guys based out of Canada, I think is the question.
We are based out of Canada.
Yeah, it's a Canadian organization, Nishan. So
No, I just was curious because I haven't heard of you guys, but I think the rest of the team has. So it was just good to know. Just curiosity. Anyway, nice to meet you, Neha, and the rest
Yeah.
of the team.
likewise.
If we become the 21st state, no problem. We'll just 21st, 51st. I messed it up. Sorry, guys.
That's so good. Awesome.
All right. Well, if there's
Thanks,
no,
everyone.
Yeah, if there's no further questions, we'll let everyone drop off, but thank you
Thanks,
guys for
everybody.
joining.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.